Hi, good day, students. Today we're going to take a look at a continuation of our last tutorial on resources. We are still focusing on the aspect of human resource, and today we're going to start by looking at factors influencing population change. Now, factors influencing population change would have to do with the increase of population or the decrease of population. So when we think about the increase of population, the first thing that we should think about is the birth rate. So the birth rate refers to the number of live births each year for every 1,000 people in a population. This is influenced by economic conditions and healthcare, family planning, culture and religious attitudes, and education. Okay, so basically you must know the definition for birth rate. Again, I'm going to repeat it. Refers to the number of live births each year for every 1,000 people in a population. Now, why they have the additional information is it is because birth rate can be influenced by your healthcare system, how good your healthcare system is in for pre and postnatal care, right? How healthy citizens are in your country in terms of if they have proper nutrition and etc. in order to actually not just become for a female to become pregnant, but to actually deliver a healthy baby, right? If there's family planning, meaning that they would have access to certain things that would restrict the amount of children that they would make on basically their culture, right? Religious attitudes, because some religion may restrict people from having abortions, etc. In terms of education, it could be pertaining to women and men as well, but mainly women who are educated and seek to get into the workforce. It means that they would try to have less children because they would see having a lot of children as a burden towards actually attaining certain positions in their workforce. So these are things that are basically, as a social studies student, besides just trying to cram definitions, you should try to actually learn as well or understand as well, just in case you get questions related to that in some way. You don't just assume things and feel like, okay, I know the basic definition and that is all there is to it. Okay, so you have death rate refers to the number of deaths that occur for every 1,000 people. So notice that the definitions are quite similar, right? Refers to the number of deaths that occur for every 1,000 people in a population. This is influenced by development and economic prosperity, medical facilities, and healthcare. So it is kind of similar to birth rate. Okay, so the death rate as well, in terms of at what age, so life expectancy, all of that comes into play there. At what age would somebody possibly die in a country if, aside from having accidents or unnatural causes, as we say, okay, murders, etc., right? The death rate basically would be based on medical facilities, access to health care. If people have health care in their own community and it is easily accessible, proper nutrition, they would have access to food and all the nutritional value of food, whether it be protein, vitamins, etc. All right, so death rate, birth rate, and death rate has to do with all of that. And basically, if we think about social studies, we think about people and behavior alone, but it intertwines with their behavior, intertwines with resources, availability of resources, and the government, what the government is doing in terms of harnessing the resources, both natural and human resources, etc. So we have to have a general idea of some of these things. Okay, so if we go on, we have another definition of growth rate and natural increase, determined by finding the difference between the birth and death rates. Now, natural increase is when the birth rate is higher than the death rate. I'm going to repeat that. Natural increase is when the birth rate is higher than the death rate. It means that basically we are having more live births than deaths. Okay, so in other words, to put it in layman's terms, people are having more children than the amount of people who are dying. Okay, so the population will naturally increase within itself, and that does not mean have anything to do with immigration, etc. It has to do with people who are natural citizens of the country. When we say natural citizens, we mean that they were already born in the country and belong to the country in some way or the other before. Okay, right? So that will be natural increase. And then we have another factor that will influence population change, which would be migration. It occurs when people move within a country or between countries. That's a general definition. So we have a lot of definitions here that you could learn for your paper 2 or your paper 1, because paper 1 has a lot of definition type questions. Emigration is when people move away to another country, and immigration is when people move in from another country. Net immigration occurs when the number of people moving into a country exceeds the number of people leaving. So this can occur in a situation like in Trinidad or in some other Caribbean countries where we had this situation with the Venezuelans coming into the country by thousands. So that would have been net immigration. It means that more people were moving into our country than the amount of people leaving. Because I don't think that if we had 2,000 or 3,000 Venezuelans coming into a particular country, we're just calling a number. It is not based on any statistics, right? I don't think that we would have the same amount of people just leaving the country permanently. Okay, so that is net immigration that will influence population change. Fertility rate, the average number of children born to each woman during her lifetime. Okay, so that fertility rate. Infant mortality rate, the death of infants under 1 year of age for every 1,000 live births. This is sometimes an indicator of a country's level of development, right? So you have indicators of development, indicators of quality of life, etc., that you also have to pay attention to. So things like infant mortality rate, death rate, birth rates, all of those things are indication of a country's development, because it would mean that if it is that we have a very small, right, infant mortality rate, it means that our country is being able to supply to the needs of its citizens, of its community, in terms of healthcare, in terms of all the different things pertaining to having a healthy society. Life expectancy, the number of years of a person of a given age in a specific country or region can expect to live. Okay, so life expectancy, the number of years a person of a given age in a specific country or region can expect to live. Now, in our country, our life expectancy could be, I don't know, possibly over 75. Okay, now that is a fairly good life expectancy. You have life expectancies in certain countries where people live until over 90 years of age, etc. Okay, so it means that does this mean? Life expectancy could lead to what is called an aging population. An aging population basically occurs when you have people living to very old age, to a very old age, possibly even to over 90 or 100 years old, right? And it creates, it represents something good in terms of your developmental status, in terms of your um, quality of life and all these type of things. Okay, it represents something good, but on the negative aspect of it, it creates an increased dependency ratio where, as we mentioned before in the previous tutorial, that we have a certain age bracket that actually creates or generates wealth for society, whether it be between the ages of 16 to 65 or what have you, the working population basically, okay, that are expected to generate wealth and take care of all the amenities of the dependents, whether it be children or the aging population or etc. So that means that life expectancy, if considered and tied into the whole aspect of an aging population, can represent two things, okay? And how do we care for our people who are our elderly in our society in the Caribbean is something that is something that can be an issue, so to speak. Okay, so as we move along, population distribution, it describes the way in which a population is spread out. Population density is the degree of concentration of people living in a given area, equal to total number of people divided by the area. Now, sometimes they can ask you to calculate population density, believe it or not, right? So I would advise you to, it is not difficult because this is in words here, but if you see it in a textbook, it is not really difficult to actually do. So you should just go to your textbook and get the formula for calculating population density and just jot it down a couple of times so you will remember it, okay? Because even though I'm reading for you, the best way to learn is always to write. So this is why you can possibly stop this tutorial at any point in time, because this is basically a note and you can actually jot down or write down the note, right, as well, so you can actually hear me explaining it, but at the same time you would also actually be able to have it as a permanent note in your book to refer to. Now, factors influencing population distribution would basically be one, the relief of land, places that are easy to build houses and grow food. So people would not settle in a rocky area that they can't grow food, okay? Basically, if you have people settling there, it would be a sparse distribution of people. It would not be a dense population, right? People have a tendency to look for an area in terms of relief of land that is close to waterways, whether it be rivers, streams, the ocean, etc., so that they can access fertile land and they can access water. They can't drink water from the ocean, by the way. That is not what I mean. Okay, but they can access food, whether it be through fishing, etc. And if they are close to waterways, that means that they can access water to water their plants, etc. Okay, and they can create agricultural communities, and that basically is how communities were actually created. And the first set of settlers moved from nomadic to setting up tribes, as so to speak, and all of these sorts of things historically. But moving back to factors, so you understand relief of land, right? So you wouldn't want to go and settle on the top of a mountain where you have rocks and you have no way to provide for food, okay? The other aspect is your climate. Certain conditions make it difficult for human habitation, such as low temperatures or long periods of drought or heavy rainfall. Right? So if it is difficult, like low temperatures, where do we have low temperatures? Like the Arctic area and so forth, right? Where you have deserts. Now, deserts are basically areas where, like the Arctic area, and then you have the desert area, that people cannot actually grow food, etc. So you have low habitation in those type of areas. Okay, so you have long periods of droughts or heavy rainfalls. Now, the third one is fertile areas. This attracts human habitation and settlement, obviously. Okay, so fertile areas would be an easy answer. So you always target the easy answers so that you would be able to remember it for your exam. For mineral resources, obviously attracts people. It even attracts people from foreign areas, right? Foreign lands to come to third world area if they only know that you have a mineral resource that is easy to harness, that creates wealth. They will be at your doorstep in no time. Okay, so it provides employment opportunities and represents economic importance. Any other issues are sometimes bypassed. Okay, so let us read that again. Mineral resources, basically you should learn mineral resources by now because you are a social studies student. Mineral resources are basically harnessed from the earth. Okay, it could be coal, it could be diamonds, it could be bauxite, it could be oil, it could be gas, it could be like LNG, it could be so many different things, right? That represent so much wealth. And we have a lot of these things in the Caribbean, and you should also learn where we have it in the Caribbean. Like, what do we have in Trinidad? In Trinidad, we will have oil and gas as our basic mineral, right? We have Jamaica also has oil and gas, has bauxite, has, I believe, iron ore, right? We have so many different things, right? Now, it provides employment opportunities and it represents economic importance, okay, because of the wealth that it generates, okay? Mineral resources generates a lot of wealth, okay? And however, remember, mineral resources are sometimes what you call non-renewable resources. Okay, so non-renewable resources has a lot of issues around that. So as they say here, any other issues are sometimes bypassed. Okay, it is bypassed, like pollution. Okay, the fact that some of the jobs are temporary and not permanent. So if the companies feel any pressure for in terms of economic hardship that is triggered in some other part of the world, like the US or China or wherever, it is because that they would have no problem, little or no problem, just retrenching people, firing people, laying off people, whatever word you want to use, okay, right? And they can actually uproot their entire company and shut down because their company may not have originated in the Caribbean. Okay, so you have again repeating, you have problems with pollution as well, whether it be land pollution, water pollution, air pollution, etc. Okay, now the fifth factor that influence population distribution is developed areas. It offers a range of facilities such as urban areas for schools, tertiary institutions, factories, businesses, entertainment, etc. So some of these developed areas actually attract people, right? Because of the amenities and because some people would want to live a certain standard of living, they move from rural areas to sometimes urban areas, okay, in order for them to access these amenities. Now, types of vegetation: heavily forested areas such as Belize and Guyana are uninhabitable for humans. Okay, so you have that issue as well. Right, so then we move on to migration, cause and consequences. Migration is the movement of people from one area to another. So that is a definition. Migration is the movement of people from one area to another. Migration can be temporary in the case of work or schooling, right? So people can actually go to other countries just to go to school for 3 years or 5 years, etc., and then move back home to their original. And they can do so for work as well, right? For sometimes you have people in Trinidad or other countries that might go to Guyana or go to Suriname or wherever to actually work for a period. Right, so internal migration occurs within a country and external migration occurs between one country and another. Okay, so we also have internal migration, by the way, right, that occurs within a country. So people can move from rural to urban areas or from urban to rural areas depending on their needs and desires at a certain point in time. And we also have external migration, which occurs between one country and another. Okay, so we're going into causes of migration. Now, this is basic. You learn this in Form 3 or something, Form 2 or Form 3, and it is basic. This part is basic common sense that you should try to remember. And as we're talking about common sense, students are not advised to use common sense in answering social studies questions and actually learn proper definitions, etc. That would be the best way for you to actually get a good grade. So we have push factors. Push factors mean what will push you out of an area. What will push an individual out of an area to go to another area. So push factors could be lack of modern infrastructure, religious persecution, lack of jobs, crime and violence, limited educational and recreational and cultural facilities, low wages. So there are certain things that will make people basically unhappy, or sometimes it will make life really difficult for them. So they decide to move, okay? And with that, they will have to decide where they are going, and that will be influenced by pull factors. Pull factors is what draws people to another area, which is sort of almost the same thing as the push factors, but it will draw you towards like social and cultural amenities and facilities, so that they will actually have more access to probably being able to take part in cultural activities in your country, like whether it be going to see a play, going to see probably different concerts, etc. Right? Being able to socialize in a different way in their community, etc. Educational opportunities. Probably they would have better schools in an area that they consider better schools in an area for their children to be able to grow the way that they want them to grow. Availability of jobs, meaning that they would be able to get better jobs, better paying jobs, or a job, because some people may not have had a job. Okay, modern infrastructure like roads, telephone, electricity, sanitation, and housing. There are people who actually move to different areas to gain access to these things. Modern infrastructure, right? And access to food. There are people who move from one country to the next to actually because they have no food, right? Or they have very little food to survive. Okay, so again, some people move for certain things like the entertainment and what have you, right? That are not so critical. And then there are people who move because it is critical to their actual life and their livelihood to be able to survive. They move. okay, from one place to the next. Okay, so we have internal migration as well. We have rural to urban migration. Now, first, to explain what the word rural means, rural would mean in our layman term what we call countryside. It means an agriculturally based community, rural, okay? That doesn't have all the amenities of the city life. Urban area would be more industrialized area. So rural is more agrarian based, urban will be more industrialized based, and it would be assumed that it would have more social amenities, more educational opportunities, more jobs because of the industries that are set up in some of these areas. Okay, so most people make this move for economic reason, that is to find work. This is common in Caribbean countries, and governments usually have strategies to encourage citizens to remain in rural areas. Increased number of people living in the cities is known as urbanization. So urbanization is a term that you should try to also understand what is urbanization. Urbanization is not necessarily uh, an ideal situation. So let us go back a little bit where they say government usually have strategies to encourage citizens to remain in rural areas. It means that they would try to get people more involved in agriculture. They would probably subsidize agriculture or do the other things. Probably they would try to make sure that they are these access to the same healthcare facilities like health centers, whether it be preventative healthcare facilities, etc. All right, and curative healthcare facilities. That's like the health centers, more hospitals, more schools, right? Public transport. These are some of the things, and better roadways, access to things like better housing. So they may even try to create housing schemes, etc. So those are some things that usually government strategies usually to remain in rural areas. Now let us go forward to the whole aspect of urbanization. Urbanization is not necessarily a good thing because it encourages things like a drain on resources of that particular community. So if people leave, and a lot of people leave and go to Shogunas or Port of Spain, we are talking about Trinidadians here, right? It means that they would have a drain on the resources, meaning a drain on the amount of the healthcare facilities. So if you go into the hospitals, it will maybe really overcrowded, right? They would have a drain on the education resources available there. Even garbage disposal, a whole lot of things, and it creates slums and gangs, etc. Because a lot of people move with the expectation that life will be better, and sometimes it is not always so, and then they turn to a life of crime. Now, this doesn't happen to everybody, but it is an aspect of urbanization. There are many aspects of urbanization that you should also read up on and get familiar with. Now, urban to rural, people move to rural areas due to overcrowding, high population levels, or crime and violence. So people do move from urban to rural areas. If the government builds a housing scheme, a lot of people move from urban area to rural area, right, to gain access to those housing schemes who have been renting, etc. Then you have people, a lot of rural areas who may decide, owners of huge areas of lands may decide to sell their land and open up residential areas, etc. And urban people from urban areas move to those areas as well. And as we stated here, basically due to overcrowding, high population levels, or crime and violence. So sometimes they move for their safety. Okay, external migration between Caribbean countries, we call that regional migration. This is usually a response to employment opportunities, CSME encourages movement of labor to share skills around the region. So we have regional migration basically is something that is encouraged by CARICOM and its branch known as CSME, which is CARICOM Single Market and Economy. Okay, right now it encourages free movement of labor outside of the Caribbean region, usually to Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. This is usually for work, education, improvement of standard of living. So there are a lot of people who don't think that the Caribbean can offer them a decent standard of living that they actually want to. So they move out from the entire region to the United States or UK, etc. Okay? So the impact of migration. The impact of internal migration. Negative effects of internal migration include overcrowding of some city residential areas and the development of unplanned settlements. That's what we call squatters or shanty towns, right? These type of areas that are developed. Okay, there can be inadequate infrastructure, particularly regarding water and sanitation. So if people move to these squatting areas, obviously you would not have proper infrastructure like even roads, right? Proper roads. They might have a track or a trace. They might have, they may not have electricity unless a certain amount of people eventually move there and probably petition for electricity, water, etc. So just imagine initially the effects of this unplanned settlement, as we call it, okay? And these are actually happening in the capital of a lot of Caribbean countries, okay? In Port of Spain, we have unplanned settlements, etc. And you have a lot of crime and poverty, etc. coming out of those areas. And poor healthcare provision. The hope for employment is not always there, and there can be a rise in crime and violence. The positive effects of internal migration include new skills being made available to the receiving area. Money may be sent back to the supply area, and migrants can return with new skills and funds to assist development. So in this example is like for people who have moved abroad to Canada, UK, America, etc. Sometimes it is to the benefit of their families who are still in the Caribbean, because that means they are able to receive foreign exchange, they are able to receive money, US money, Canadian money, pounds, etc., to take care of their family and spend within this country and improve the standard of living. If it is that people return from UK, Canada, etc., they also return with new skills that they can utilize in the Caribbean country as well. So there are the negative aspects and the positive aspects. Okay. Now external migration outside the region. Negative effects of external migration include the loss of qualified and skilled persons from the region, sometimes known as a brain drain. Brain drain people. Every year, people come in, and when they hear the term brain drain, they find it is so strange, and yet it turns up in examination paper, end of term test papers, etc. Okay, so the brain drain is basically the loss of qualified and skilled persons from a region or country. Okay, the reduction of the economically productive portion of the population and a great dependency ratio, right? A greater dependency ratio. So if our educated people decide to leave, it means that our dependency ratio that we spoke about in the last tutorial would increase. That will be not a good thing. The positive effects of external migration include revenue from those seeking money back to their family, and individuals return with qualifications or skills acquired abroad that we just spoke about. Net migration refers to the difference between immigration and emigration. The difference between immigration meaning people coming into the country and people who are leaving the country. Positive net migration means greater immigration than emigration. The opposite is negative net migration. Now, as you see going down, we have notes as well on population statistics, etc., and development of human resources, which we will get to next in our next tutorial. As I said before, resources is the largest topic in the C.S.E.C social studies syllabus. So it will take us, if I want, I could probably make a video for about 2 hours, but I guess you will get bored by then if you are not already. I hope you are not though, and you have listened to the tutorial, and you can also pause it in between and actually take down the notes. Now the notes were comprised and developed from the social studies study guide. So if you see anything familiar, and I have to reference the note as well from where it was taken from. So it isn't the identical thing, but it is actually basically from the study guide. Okay, so look forward to the next tutorial that will continue the same topic, and we are still on human resources.